So now, for part 4 of this World's Midnight lecture series, I'm going to introduce the core thesis of the law of being. So this is very intertwined with the Spinozan substance, or you could call it the monad. It's the historical grand systems theory level work of elucidating the cosmos, or the inner logic of the universe, which extends in Leibniz, it extends in Spinoza, and it's at work in the grand cosmological processes of thinkers like Kepler or even Giordano Bruno. These are historical attempts that have existed pre-modernity and post-modernity, right? This is the long-scale project that is in systems as diverse as the Rig Veda and the Mesoamerican cosmologies. It's a world historical background of attempting to elucidate what is truth, right? What is the existential law that exists across all scales and all forms? So the core thesis here of the law of being would be existence is not substance. So this is not so much a refutation of Spinoza, but it's taking Spinoza a level deeper into a process-based ontology, which became very popular with thinkers like Bergson or Whitehead as the march toward and through modernity progressed. That existence is not substance. Existence is maintained distinguishability under entropy. This would not be possible without the thermodynamic revolution to elucidate this, because what we're talking about is a form which exists against the background noise and the pressure of dissolution, which is the entropy sink of the universe. Whether that's a star, a cell, an organism, a civilization, a symbol, an image, or a self. These are different implementations of the same persistence operation, albeit under different constraints, which gives them the specific appearance or substance, which Spinoza argues or speaks about, that they acquire certain attributes because they're functioning under different constraints. However, that which maintains them, this distinguishability under entropy principle, is the primary operator. It's the universal operator, which I call the operator identity. So there are 3 fundamental principles at work. One is the concept of entropy, which is developed by everyone from Carnot all the way up to Boltzmann and Maxwell, and into the revolutionary theory of Prigogine. It's that all systems move towards equilibrium unless work is performed. So the persistence mechanism is itself keeping the boundary of the cell or the organism afloat unto dispersion or dissolution, which is the escaping of heat energy from the pseudo-closed system of the being itself. So nothing exists by default. Everything that exists is being held indistinguishability. So that's the second point, distinguishability. A thing exists only insofar as it remains distinguishable from its environment, which is what we just discussed. It's the concept of everything from the cell membrane to the Great Wall of China. A star exists because fusion holds it apart from collapse. A cell exists because metabolism maintains internal organization. Civilization exists because symbolic systems regulate collective coherence. This is critical. This is everything from language to religion to mythological symbology, which is discussed by everyone from Eliade to Joseph Campbell. And then a self exists because regulatory continuity preserves identity through time. And this is very critical. This goes very deep into my concept of psychology via neuroscience and the genome, which is a constructed self which must persist in its identification of and with itself. This goes from everything from caloric consumption to the concept of a name, in order to move against, to sort of kick and scream against dissolution, which is the heat sink itself. And then the third point here in the triad of these fundamental principles is persistence. All persisting systems solve the same problem: how to maintain form against dissolution. This is the operator identity. And this is what's so fascinating. There's a differential in persistence, whereas to say a stone has sunken into a very, very, very low resolution form of persistence. It is able geologically to remain right? It has become entirely fixed. It is not in a process of metabolic churn or thermonuclear churn. It is matter that has fallen into this very high density, low resolution state of persistence. It is not running a persistence mechanism. Whereas a star, a cell, a genome is performing this process of continually remaining. I hope that makes sense. I'm not the expert in geology by any means. So yes, operator identity. The same persistence structure, which is key here, appears across scales: star, cell, genome, nervous system, civilization, art, image, and consciousness itself. So this is what's critical, right? And this is the parting from Spinoza. The substrate, which would be the substance, changes. The operation does not. And this is the critical intervention here when we're talking about God or the universal self or the oversoul or the source, what have you. This is not a physical material thing. It's an operation that is occurring across scalar substrates, all of which are performing the same operation but in a different vocabulary, according to the dimension or dimensional space that operation inhabits. Again, art, image, symbology, civilization, a collective nervous system, genome, the persistence module that exists within a living organism, star, thermonuclear fusion. So modernity is the fragmentation here that occurs, and that's what the operator identity is moving towards elucidating. It is bringing the full picture in the unification of art, history, science, thermodynamics, and deep psychology, right? The thermodynamic, thermonuclear, neuroscientific nature of what it is to exist and be human, to experience the operator identity, which is to incarnate the operator identity self-reflectively. This is a state of being that must regulate itself in space and in time. And we understand this concept quite well now, somatically, nervous system regulation. The acceleration of the world picture, the fragmentation of the ontos, which is the cosmogony, the break of the cosmogony worldwide due to technological acceleration, scientific specialization, industrial thermodynamics, information overload, and it is the death of the inherited cosmologies, which are formerly the ground, right, however pre-modern or however narrative or however fragmented from this true ontological substrate of the operator identity they collapse, and the ground falls out from them, which is, again, the world's midnight, as we discussed. What I've elucidated in further depth in the law of being is that regulated systems exist in one of three conditions. Zone 1 is underload, and this the way that I love to think about this is a weightlifting analogy. I'm a serious weightlifter. So the primary principle at work in order to grow the muscle, a hypertrophy, a hypertrophic adaptation, one of my earliest theoretical concepts or constructs was psychic hypertrophy, which is sort of the hypertrophy of the universal mind, as you will. Every regulated system exists in one of three conditions. One being zone 1, underload, no growth, capacity atrophies. This is a catabolic state. Zone 2, adaptive load, growth through recoverable stress. This is the green zone of adaptation, progressive growth through tissue tear down and repair through adequate rest or ingestion of nutrients. Zone 3, overload, breakdown and restricted policy space. This is where an organism or a civilization or a symbolic code collapses into chaos due to the overwhelm of throughput, right? Whether this is energy or information, without adequate grounding and restoration as a cyclical principle. This would be everything from combustion to collapse, nervous breakdown, etc. So This is really important to recognize, because this concept of the law of being moves deeply into the space which is required to unify. Right, we already have the thermodynamic foundation which governs physical systems well in hand, But to extend this into civilizations, to extend into language, to extend into the thermonuclear experience of being human existentially, the actual incarnate nervous system compression of identity or self via genome transmission over time. This is a incredibly sophisticated reflective condition, right? Again, through the creation and establishment of the creative mind, the imaginative genius that emerges through history. We brought up Shelley. This is the creation of a highly sophisticated technology of the brain. So, experiencing collapse, right, as opposed to let's say that collapse occurring in physical systems, which is not necessarily, insofar as we are aware, experiential, right? Let's say the collapse of a star. This could be anthropomorphized in terms of that star feeling an emotion or sensation of collapse. But when the human being experiences collapse via, let's say, the end of Rome or the end of a relationship or nervous system breakdown, what is happening is when these systems exceed capacity and enter into chronic states of zone 3 overload, they narrow into expressions of, let's say, it's either avoidance, aggression, dissociation, or compulsion. And what I'm arguing here is these are not moral failures. They're regulatory outputs to throughput exceeding potential to integrate state. Let's see what else I have here. So consciousness is the interior phenomenon of this self-referential regulation made possible by the sophisticated development of the nervous system over centuries of evolution, as well as the brain. That emotion itself is not, right, as we discuss emotion, let's say in Kierkegaard or in Tolstoy or Hugo, right? These profound elucidators of emotional sensation or of feeling, the sophisticated existential state of the human being. This is not irrational. It's not decorative. It's not aesthetic. It's actually information that's being conveyed from the being to the being about its viability conditions themselves, whether or not it is staying within a regulated zone or collapsing by increased throughput or falling into total atrophy. So you have, it's a viability condition information, whether that's anxiety or awe, suffering, joy, grief, and love. And so this is the experience of being human at the atomized level. And so when we're talking about the creation of civilization, this is something that exists because no nervous system can carry the recursive burden of self-awareness alone. So everything from art to ritual to myth to architecture, religion, sport, and image, these are all regulatory communal technologies of conveying, expressing, and thus convening in the human experience itself. And primarily, I elucidate art compresses the experiential magnitude into survivable form. This is the creation of the symbol system. It's a persistent structure itself, which not only allows the organism to survive by way of regulatory compression, which is expression, but it allows experience to survive the death of the organism. And I've elucidated this in the Cueva de los Manos cave paintings, as well as Lascaux, those cave paintings as well. So what we're understanding here is that what is persisting at any given moment in time and what exists, what is persisting, is all of the same operation occurring at different scales and substrates, and thus appears to be different. This is the issue, right? It's not a structural grasping of the operator identity. It's the apparent difference in substrate, which is irreconcilable, which creates a siloed study, whether that's philosophy, psychology, geology, stellar physics, what have you. So this is what's so important about modernity, is that modernity created all of the necessary different disciplinary forms which would allow for this unification to occur, which is the realization of the operator identity. The operator identity could not be realized without the contributions of Maxwell and Boltzmann, or Carnot or Clausius, the hyper-specific lineage of thermodynamics, as well as Cecilia Payne-Gaspachin's work on stars, the composition of stars. Philosophy, the entire strand of post-Hellenic philosophy, everyone from Francis Bacon to Percy Shelley and Nietzsche. Who else do I want to list? Spinoza. These are inheritors of this progressive process of the fragmentation of the unified pre-modern historical cosmology, which was a narrative foundation. But it was a narrative foundation built on insufficient information. Much of that narrative foundation, such as the ancient Hindu metaphysics or the ancient Mesoamerican metaphysics, is profoundly true at a scientific level. But it's true at a narrative level, a pre-modern level. It's not at a sufficient resolution to withstand the technological development that was created in modernity. Created through modernity, created by this progression of what is allowed by industrial technology, which is, of course, the emergence of a fossil fuel, sort of a second Big Bang that is experienced by human consciousness, which is this explosion of energetic potential buried beneath the earth, which is recovered and then thrust into force. Everything from the light bulb to the car to the jet airplane, right? These are physical manifestations of this hyperacceleration. So what was lost is really what was found in this fragmentation. And this is why the operator identity is so important, because the operator identity, through the contributions made by figures as diverse as Freud, Marx, Virginia Woolf, you name it. These figures who are operating in all of these different silos and going to full depth, Prigogine, Payne Gaposchkin, allows for the existential substrate operation, again, between star, cell, civilization, and self, to emerge through this very specific, focused, high-contrast study of all of these different substrates that exist across scales, right? Everything from the birth of the universe down to the single-celled organism, to understand how these operations function. And what is required is a unified metaphysics, and not a metaphysics in an abstract way, a metaphysics in an structural, ontological way, to examine all of these different substrates at the highest level of their resolution, and to then identify what is the unifying structural operation that is occurring throughout all of them, which is compression all the way down from stellar nuclear physics to the creation of the human symbol, the bison on the cave wall. And furthermore, beyond compression, how compression functions to allow for a discrete form to persist over time. How to maintain form against dissolution. And this is a strategy. It's a strategy that's deployed across existence itself. And what's so fascinating about stone to me is that stone has found the absolute ground of maximum persistence. And this is also where human beings carve their most long-living forms, such as you could say everything from the ruins of Pompeii to the pyramids of Giza to, again, Lascaux and Cueva de los Manos. It is the solution symbolically, right? The creation of a symbol system which is etched or carved into a stone wall or a stone geological structure to allow for human information, human understanding, human experience to persist past the physical thermodynamic limitations of the degrading, escaping heat energy from the pseudo-closed system of the physical organism of the human being and its lifespan according to whichever era it lives in, which is the medical technology, the resources available to it, the ability to maintain metabolic health in the face of entropy, to engage in negentropic practices, such as I would say weightlifting, or the cultivation of a balanced, high-nutrition diet, high ability to rest and relax and sleep, not being attacked or poisoned, etc., etc. So I think this is pretty clearly understandable now. And again, I'm just going to return to the core thesis to sum this up. Existence is not substance. It's maintained distinguishability under entropy. What exists, therefore, is what successfully persists against dissolution. That stars, cells, organisms, civilizations, symbols, images, and selves are not separate categories of being. They're different implementations of the same persistence operation under different constraints. And what does this mean, right? This takes us all the way down into human psychology and human development and human behavior, how to persist under constraint, which is the constraint of the physical body, maintaining organ system functions. This is critical. Just as it's critical for a star, the fusion system of a star, right? The reason that a star persists is that fusion holds it apart from collapse, just as a cell metabolism maintains its internal organization. And you can understand the collapse of civilizations in large part either due to external invasion or internal symbolic collapse, right? Collapse of meaning, collapse of language, collapse of religious glue. But these are both the same form of collapse because symbolic systems fail to regulate collective coherence. Those symbolic systems could be overtaken or they could fail internally. And then finally, a self exists because regulatory continuity preserves identity through time. So this is what creates the internal psychological concept of the self-identity, the human identity. And this is the neurological, genetic experience that a discrete organism, a discrete human organism, has of life due to a genetic inheritance plus the experience of that organism, which changes that genetic inheritance over time through epigenetic relationship to life, which is experience. The impact of life upon the nervous system of that genetic inheritor is informational, and it informs how that identity is constructed in real time. So I think that's all I need to elucidate here. Ideally, this is to a degree clear, and I'll just sum up this one last thing. The task is to reunify all of these different discrete disciplines which have emerged in the process of modernity as modernity itself. Science, philosophy, art, psychology, cosmology, thermodynamics, consciousness, into a new ontos. And this ontos, I'm suggesting quite clearly, is the operator identity. It is not, as Spinoza says, a substance, but rather it is the operational performance beneath the appearance of the substrate across scales. So the entire project can essentially be compressed to this. The universe is a persistence process under entropy. Life, mind, civilization, and art are successive regulatory structures within that process, which means they exist as a sort of scalar nesting doll, which is reproducing this operational procedure down to the highest level of complexity and compression. Everything from the star to the symbol of the bison etched on the cave wall by the early human being. Modernity fragmented the human ontos through technological acceleration and disciplinary specialization. This is the fragmentation of the pre-modern cosmogony, the pre-modern world cosmogonies, by way of the acceleration, which was everything from the microscope, the telescope, and the immense capacity for microscopic surgery of the human body. Harvesting oil from the earth with progressive efficiency, powering factories, powering cars, changing the way that the world is traversed, understood, as well as the self is traversed and understood in the cosmos. So it's a unified process. And this is the fragmentation of the ontos into disciplinary specialization to interrogate life at the highest level of contrast, complexity, and definitionality. The next stage of history is the reunification of knowledge into a higher order understanding of being itself. It is the bringing together of the necessary depth that has been created across all of these disciplinary forms at the highest level of resolution across all scales under the operator identity, under the true primordial, essentially God function of existence itself, of being itself across all scales. This is the heavy-hitting realization, is that it is not that there is a single substrate, but rather that there is a single operation at work across all scales. So that's going to do it for me. Thank you.